In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples today. Welcome to Totally Lit, the podcast celebrating reading, writing and creating literature. I'm your host, Ky Garvey. Thank you for listening. Christian White, welcome to Totally Lit.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Listeners, I'm totally fangirling here. I thought I would let you in on that at the start, just in case I make a fool of myself during this interview. Christian White is in the house. I'm really excited. You have a new book coming out. Would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
I would, yeah, I do, and I would. It's called The Long Night, and it's about a long night. This is how creative I am. This is my. And you know what? It wasn't even my title. When I delivered the manuscript, it was called Book 5. But my publisher said, you probably come up with a better title. So it's called The Long Night. This is at the very beginning of my publicity tour. So I'm still getting the hang of pitching this without actually giving away any secrets. So I'm going to be super vague, but it's about a woman, a 19-year-old woman who gets kidnapped and about a mother trying to rescue her. And it all takes place over a single night.
Okay.
See how brief that was? And
that was very brief.
Didn't actually really tell you anything.
Excellent. So we can finish the podcast now.
That's it. It's over. It's funny because when my last book was coming out, The Ledge, it was about a month or two out from release, and they said, "What's it about?" And I panicked, and I just lied. I just lied to them because I was so worried that I'd give something away. So at least I'm not lying to you.
Now, the Ledge, I have had guests on my podcast when I've said, what are they reading? They have mentioned Christian White, The Ledge. So you have made impact in the Australian literary scene, obviously, as other writers are definitely reading your work. So that even actually my last episode with Carla Salmon, she mentioned The Ledge as something that both her and her husband had enjoyed together.
Love that.
I'm like, what are the odds? And I messaged Carla and said, keep manifesting guests for me. I don't know how that happened, but you mentioned Christian White and he is my next guest. So.
Yeah, well, I've been reading Stephen King. King.
Amazing.
I'm
Thank
putting
you.
that out into my, so that's your next guest, right?
Oh my goodness. Can you imagine interviewing Stephen King? He would definitely have me on my toes. So you are not only a novelist, but you are also a screenwriter.
Yes.
So you've worked on some amazing pieces of work, clickbait, it's cool. How do you find the different genres in terms of writing long-form pieces of work, but then also writing scripts as well?
In some ways, they really speak to each other and inform the other. So I think on the page, it helps that my when I write books, I write in a pretty visual kind of cinematic style because that's sort of what I do in screenplays. And I think when you write a screenplay, every single word has to earn its place, not even just dialogue, but every moment, because everything costs money, everything you sort of write to a budget, all of that sort of stuff, which teaches you to be very brutal with, I'm so good at killing my darlings. I'm just murder them without any sort of guilt because you kind of have to in film. So that helps, going back and forth. And also just, you have to, when you're writing a script, you have to be economic with the way you tell a story. And it needs to, ideally every single scene should progress the plot in some way and the character in some way. And if it doesn't do those two things, or at least one of those things, I'll cut it. So they really speak to each other in that way. They're also they're both sort of collaborative. I mean, they're both very collaborative, but in comparison to one another, it's pretty extreme. So the book, you write a book and you have a publisher and an editor or a handful of editors around you. So it's very collaborative in that sense, but you are very much the kind of the captain, for better or worse. Whereas when you're writing a script, this is going to sound cynical, and I don't mean it to sound cynical, but you're part of a bigger machine. That there's cast and there's the director and there's heads of department and there's the studio and all of that sort of stuff. So you're part of this thing, and when you put out a product, when you put out a book, it's very much more, it's closer to you, I suppose. And so it's hard not to be more emotionally connected to that. But it has the advantage of, if a book comes out and someone hates it, you can't hide anywhere. But if I write a show or a film and someone hates it, I've got so many people to blame. I just like, yeah, I know it wasn't me. I wrote all the best bits. Everything you don't like about it was someone else. So it does have that. It does have that advantage. It's also really interesting because if you step back and look at my schedule, I'm really, really busy with the amount of projects. I mean, I'm always careful not to take on too many projects, and only projects I really love and feel like I can give something to. But you still look at that and it's still quite a bit. And it's funny because day to day, it doesn't feel like that because I might be writing, you know, a book on a Monday and a Tuesday, and I'll jump to a TV script on a Wednesday, Thursday, and it never feels like additional work. It feels so different. So it kind of, I think even though I've got a lot on, it feels very, I don't know, it stops things from getting, I don't know, predictable and stale, I guess.
Yeah. And so you've worked on, for example, the Survivors.
Yeah.
What sort of experience is that like when you're writing a script for another author's work?
That was a big one for me because, I know Jane Harper just a little bit from doing events and things like that, and who wrote Survivors, which is what the show was adapted from. And I actually, when I've told her this, it's sort of embarrassing, but I just tried to follow her career. So she won the VPLA's, the Victorian Premier's Award for an unpublished manuscript with The Dry. And so I just did the same thing. I just entered the same thing and I ended up winning, and I really followed. And I think that, Australian crime has always been around, and there's always been great writers like Gary Disher has been writing forever. But Jane Harper, I think, gave that whole Australian crime genre a huge injection. And then now suddenly it's blown up, but it wasn't like that, 10 years ago. So my point is I owe a lot to her. So taking on, going in and writing an episode of a show based on her book was weird, really weird, but fantastic. When I got the offer, I jumped at it. And it's also a little different because it's a 6-episode series and I wrote one episode on the show, but it certainly wasn't my show. So the showrunner and the creator was Tony Ayres, who he and I created Clickbait together. So really it's Tony's, based on this amazing source material, it's Tony's vision and drive. And so I felt that allowed me some sort of distance that I'm not, if I had the responsibility to adapt the thing myself and I was driving it all, that would be a lot more pressure. But as it was, I could just jump in and I trust that whole team, but I trust Tony. He's a ridiculously talented and beautiful, wonderfully kind man. He's just a great person. And I trusted him and I trusted his vision. So really it was me coming in and trying to get as close to his vision as I could, with also while injecting, yourself into it. And the way it works generally on a show like that, if you're running it, it's a bit different. But when you're coming in and writing an episode, you'll come in and there'll be a writer's room and you'll help plot, you'll move things around, and then you'll plot your own episode. And then you go away with this document that is the result of, 6 really, really talented writers sitting in a room, coming up with the plot and coming up with these moments. So when you leave that room, you've got this amazing document. So yeah, I don't know. It's a team effort, I guess, is my point. But it was a really cool experience, and I think it turned out. I really liked the show too.
In terms of tackling a project like that, is it a case of, well, first initially reading the book so that you know what's going to happen, but also is it a case of working together to emulate, like if one writer has written an episode to begin, are you then trying to make sure that you are keeping those characters the same, so there's continuity, and using similar language and making sure that if the character has said struth in the first episode, that they're still maintaining their character throughout those episodes as you write?
Absolutely. Well, one of the big things that you do in a writer's room is you spend just a lot of time talking about each character. And often that's one of the first things you do. You'll talk about who they are and what they're like. And then the more you talk, usually you'll start writing them. You'll hear their voice, and you'll also often come up with moments that you think, oh wow, that person might do this in this moment. We should see that. I wonder if we could work that in, and or how would this person react to this particular thing that makes them unique, and then follow that follow that character. A huge thing I learned from Tony, actually, and again, this is an example of screenwriting informing my books, is that the way Tony phrases it is you should start each scene, you should write it from the inside out rather than the outside in. And what it means is if you're writing from the outside in, you're forcing plot
Mm.
onto that character, but if you start from the character, you really entrench yourself in that POV and be true to them, and explore the plot how they would really explore it, then it's always vastly more believable and emotionally satisfying. I think that characters are allowed to do stupid things because we all do. I do a million stupid things a day, so that's allowed. But when they do something so plot serving and outside their character, you can feel it and you disengage. And I think that, I think I know a lot of writers listen to this podcast, so you probably all know what I'm talking about. And I think an audience, I think readers know as well, but they might not be able to identify it. But you'll be reading something, and this character does something that's not believable, but you can suddenly feel the writer's hand and thinking, oh, okay, they just want this thing to happen, and I think that's when people reach for their phone. And that's when they emotionally disengage. And that, as a writer, is your worst enemy. So that's something. So yeah, character is hugely important. And then when you're writing a book, you don't have this room of people to sit around and talk about those characters with. But the same thing, usually character emerges for me about early in the actual writing process, but very late in the plotting process. So I'll sit down ahead of a book, I'll sit down and plot it out. And I will, every single time this happens, I will plot out the entire thing, and it's perfect and amazing. And it's got a great twist. And then about, 30 pages in, you realize none of that stuff in the back half is going to work. And that's always because, for me, it's always because I get to know that character and I get to know how they would deal with certain things. And then I always, as frustrating as this is, I always follow that character, because otherwise, yeah, that's when people are reaching for their phone.
So is there times where the character is almost creating themselves in that process?
All the time, yeah. And it sounds it sounds like a cliche, that the writer, that the character takes on a life of their own, but it's really, really true. And I think that for me, I'll often have a kind of a sketched out, a really vague sketch of a character. But it's not until I start writing them and thinking about the way they move and the way they talk in particular, and that you get to know them, and they do show you that. It's really strange. I have this thing where I think my characters are so much smarter than me. They always know exactly what to say. They always have opinions about things, and they can identify things inside, and that they know what they're feeling, which I don't. So I do think sometimes it does feel like it's coming from some, weird external place, because it is a strange, yeah, I'm sounding crazy now, but it's true.
So you know things that you don't know, or you don't
Yeah,
know what you know.
absolutely. And I
Are we
think
getting
it's,
existential now
I
already?
know. But I think so much of writing is that, but trusting that process. So the way I think of it is this, all of your experiences and good times and bad times and trauma and all of that sort of stuff go into this big bowl of soup, and when you write, you're just kind of putting pinpricks in the bottom of that bowl and holding it over the paper. It's just like little bits of pouring out, and you don't really know. Well, I don't. I'm sure much smarter authors than me know this stuff ahead of time, but I never really know what my story is about. I know the nuts and bolts. I know it's about a kidnap or a murder or whatever, but I don't know thematically what it is about until I finish the first draft and look back and realize what I was exploring. And it's weird when this latest book coming out is my fifth book, and when the bigger your body of work, the more you can sort of look back and see all of your fears that you didn't realize you had, and all these weird kind of quirks and weird interests, all these things that you're exploring on some weird subconscious level. And just the more I write, the more I trust that, I guess.
Can you tell me what it feels like in the for instance, the first time I saw a piece of my work like typeset and ready to be published, like that was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen.
Yeah.
And I have a picture book. So when my first picture book, I held that in my hands, I was like, oh, this is so exciting. Do you get that same feeling when you see your work on screen in a way that you do if you're holding a copy of your book?
It's sort of it's similar but different. There's something about holding a book, or even like you said, seeing it typeset, seeing the cover, seeing that feels so just so unreal. And I always get a feeling where seeing it at a shop is amazing, but seeing it in an airport for some reason, that's
Mm.
was my always some weird measure of success for me. If I see my book at the airport, and it's and you do you I wish I wasn't like this, but I'm sure all authors do it. You're there. I was at the airport earlier in the week, and I was there, and I was looking at books, and then you just have a cheeky look at it, and maybe straighten it up, maybe face it out if it's not faced out, just because you want. But that's still a real thrill. With film and TV, it's different because or with a show, you're sitting down usually with your loved ones to watch it and all of that sort of stuff, or you're at a premiere, which is genuinely incredible. I was around this time last year, I had a film out, Apartment 7A. It's a horror film, and we went to Austin for the premiere, and that was incredible because the audience was made up mostly of just regular people. They didn't know we were sort of there, and that was really really cool watching it with an audience and everything. But you don't weirdly the closest thing I've felt to that same sort of feeling that you get with a book is when I was in a JB Hi-Fi after my first film came out, Relic, and it was there on the shelf in a DVD. Is something about it being a physical, tangible thing that you can't really beat. And now everything's streaming. People say, "Oh, where can I watch this?" And I just name streamers. And there's something incredible about that. The amount of content is amazing, and it's really good time for creators and screenwriters and everything. But there's something about that tangible, that DVD or the actual book that you can't beat. And yeah, it's weird. It is a great feeling though, isn't it, when you see those pages come through?
Yes. It's amazing. I don't know what it is about, especially the typeset page of your own
Mm.
work. It's thrilling.
It reads better too. Suddenly, it's a
Yeah,
better book. You read it as a word. I don't know what you work in, and I know a lot of the proper, the young. Well, I don't know if they're young. A lot of writers are using Scrivener now.
yeah.
I still use Microsoft Word, so mine's this
Mm.
ugly Microsoft Word Times New Roman
I
doc.
still use Word.
Oh, good. I'm not alone. And it looks so ugly. And you read a sentence, and it's not a good sentence. But seeing it typeset, it's magic.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you think, "Oh,
Transform.
I guess this is a book." Yeah,
Mm.
it's funny because sometimes when I'm proofing something, I will save it as a PDF or I'll print it just so I can't edit on the go, and sometimes that helps. You read it in a different way, I think.
Mm.
But yeah, typeset is the best.
Now, you are writing like some quite intense, sometimes scary, horrific things. How are you feeling in the moment when you're creating that? Do you get into the zone?
Yeah,
Do you have difficulty
I
disconnecting?
I really, really creep myself out a lot, but often it's when I'm writing creepy scenes, but usually it's when I'm just kind of sitting quietly. I rent an office near the house, and just to sort of separate those worlds, and there's an armchair that kind of looks out on these pine trees, and I'll just sit there staring at these pine trees. And it's when I'm sort of figuring out story stuff in my head. And that's when I really, really creep myself out. And actually, often I will be, sitting at home in a really well lit chair, drinking a cup of tea, and my wife will come in to ask me something trivial, and she'll say, "Hey, do you want something?" And I'll go, and she's forever telling me, "Oh," because then I'll scare her, So she's, "Oh God, I thought something." So I do live when I'm working. I do live in this world of this kind of, I creep myself out, but there's also something weirdly, I think, cathartic about working with such, with such dark subject matter. You sort of, you kind of feel like yeah, it's intense, but you can control it, and actually you can push it a bit further and push it a bit further. And I always love in the scene when I'm on the page, challenging myself to push it just a little bit further, make it a little bit more tense, make it a little bit worse for the character, to the point where I'll push them to a place where I'm not really sure yet how they're going to get out of this, but that's a good challenge. But then, you know, I also sleep really well. Then my life, I think working through that stuff means that you kind of get it all out on the
Right.
page. I
Okay.
think, yeah. I was talking to someone just recently about this, and it's quite a well-known thing that within the Australian book world, crime writers are, and I'm not just saying that, maybe people are telling me this because I am one, but everyone says we're the nicest group. We all love each other. We're all super supportive. We're sort of egoless. If one person succeeds, we all get happy, whereas other genres aren't like that. I'm told the romance people, it's a bit cliquey, literary fiction types are different. But I think the reason we are so just nice is because we get it all out on the page. Remember, I don't know if it was in the movie or not, but the book might have been in the movie as well, Fight Club, the Chuck Palahniuk book from years and years ago. I remember this really interesting detail where, if you haven't read it or seen the movie, you should. It's amazing. But there's these men getting together and fighting each other, beating the crap out of each other. And one of the things that happens is, it describes this man leaving Fight Club, and then he never goes over the speed limit. He stops at every traffic. He doesn't care if someone cuts him off in traffic. He's really chilled, and I think it's because they get it all out by beating each other up. And I think it's a similar thing. You kind of, you go to these intense, dark, horrific places that you kind of purge it all. You get it all out. So if someone cuts me off now, I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. It's fine.
You heard it here, folks. Christian White sleeps well at night. There you go.
Exactly. The occasional nightmare.
And in terms of preparation for writing work like you do, has it just been like a life of consumption of that kind of genre to prepare you for writing this style of work, or has it been something you've had to learn and craft?
It's something it actually took me a while to get to the thriller horror space. I always consumed it, but I always thought, though, I actually thought I wouldn't be smart enough to write a mystery. So I really genuinely thought that was out of my, I don't know, range. This is way before I got published. So I was always reading and writing, watching stuff from just a wide range of genres and everything. And I tried, my first book, The Nowhere Child, which was a thriller, was the fifth book I tried to write, and only the second one I'd finished, and the first one I thought was anywhere near good enough. And it was really the first proper thriller that I'd attempted. So before that, I'd tried, it's so embarrassing. I tried literary fiction and comedy and sci-fi, and you could go back and read it and know exactly who I was reading at that time, because I was just kind of copying and finding my way. Kurt Vonnegut. I wrote a book that I was trying to be Kurt Vonnegut, and then I was trying to be someone else, and I think it wasn't until I wrote for years and years and found my own voice. But even then, it was this step further, because even when I'd found a voice, I still had to try out a thriller, and I don't know why. I liked consuming them, and maybe that's why I didn't attempt them. But as soon as I dipped my toe into that genre, that's when everything changed. I got my first within a year. My first show was sort of picked up, and and the book and my film, all, the film was a horror, the other two were thrillers. And as soon as that happened, which in retrospect is so obvious, and to lean into the genre that I enjoy, that's when everything started to change. So weirdly, it took me a long time to find myself, I suppose, but got there eventually.
And do you want to take me back to like when you first decided to be a writer? Like, did you have like a moment where it was like, I'm going to try and do this as a real gig?
Yeah, I was 17. I was in high school, and I did very poorly in high school. I recently looked at my reports. My mum cleaned out her little basement area, and we all got a box, all the kids, and I read my old reports and they were horrific. But I always did good in subjects that I really liked, and literature was one of those subjects. And I wrote this short story, and it was probably terrible. It was about a baby on a doorstep and all this sort of stuff. But my teacher read it out anonymously. As an example, me and this other girl's worksheet, he read out. And I was sitting there and I loved that feeling of him reading it out, no one knowing that I'd done it, but feeling this kind of, I don't know, I guess it was pride, I suppose. And, I had a difficult time in high school. So it was sort of this really unique moment. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to be a best-selling author. You're 17. It's like, yeah, that'll be easy, right? And I set myself a limit. I said I'd be 25. I'm going to be a best-selling author by 25. And if not, that seemed so old. At 17, that seemed like a real grown-up,
Yeah.
And then, that blew past. I think the plan was, I'll go to uni, I'll get some sort of backup career, but I just never ever did. And I just kept working casual jobs, just kept writing and just writing for the joy of writing. Of course I wanted to be a writer, but somewhere along the way, probably, you know, beyond 25 had come and gone, 30 had come and gone. And I just it just occurred to me that, it's okay if I never get published. Obviously, I want to, and I'd love to do this every day. I try to manifest the life I actually have now. But I also thought, the reason I write, the drive is this just obsessive joy I have for the craft and for structure and or it's just this joy that comes from working and thinking about it and thinking about, oh, what's the midpoint of this movie? I'd like to I'll like to pause it. Where are we in the movie? Oh, okay, we're at the end of Act 1. That's an interesting. I love all that stuff so much. So I think just about making a decision just to really focus on the joy of it. And really just that's kind of what I did. And then I did that for a long, long time without showing anyone anything. And then, yeah, I was 36, 37 when I thought, oh, okay, I've got to actually, I'm ready to start showing people my things. And then that sounded creepy, showing people my written work. And then, and yeah, then it happened for me, I guess. I forgot your question. I don't even know if I answered it.
We've got off track maybe, but that's okay.
I
Because I
do that.
always
I have a
have
tendency to do
more
that.
questions. In terms of when you decided to diversify and try new styles of writing, in terms of, okay, I've written a novel that's been published, I'd like to try a screenplay now. Was that a plan of attack, or was it a case of somebody suggesting or mentoring you to move into that kind of world? Or was it even a business decision about what you wanted to do with your career?
Yeah, it just sort of happened. The universe kind of just, took the decision out of my hands. So back in, oh, I don't know, a long time ago, I was fired. I was working with my wife at this job, and we were fired, and it was all my fault. I wanted to see one of the Christopher Nolan Batman films. I wanted to see it at midnight, right? And my wife was like, "That's crazy. Can't wait to see it tomorrow on a Thursday at 7 p.m. like normal people." And the way I convinced her to do it was, I said, we had this old punch in, punch out system. And I said, "I'll go in and you have a sleep in. We'll do the midnight show. You sleep in and I'll punch in your time card."
Oh,
And we got busted and fired. It was the worst thing. We were carrying our little, it was a cliche, the boxes of our belongings home. And we were just talking about what now. And I'd always been writing, but I thought, I can continue working casual jobs, or I can try to get serious. And with my now wife, she was my then girlfriend. I don't know why she stayed with me after that, but somehow she did. And she kind of
she's got to
convinced me to.
understand the passion for Batman.
Oh, exactly. I think, I think that's what she saw.
My husband loves Batman. We have
Oh,
a
you're
whole
probably at the midnight show
house
too.
full of. He's a comic book collector and has his own podcasts on comics. So
Oh,
I
brilliant. Okay, I'm going to
understand.
listen to that.
Yes,
Yeah,
someone wanting to go to something at midnight
exactly.
as
Good.
part of the experience.
Exactly. And that led me to, this crossroads moment where I was either going to go to the next boring job, which I mean I had to as well, or I could really, focus on writing. And screenwriting seemed like, I'd been obsessed with TV and movies, but also reading scripts. I've been reading scripts forever. I've been writing scripts as well. I just sort of loved every kind of sort of story I could, every kind of form I could experiment with and play with. So I went to RMIT in Melbourne to study screenwriting, and I dropped out after 1 year. It was only a 2-year course, but it was because I'd started to get little nibbles and things like that. And then, so really I was just kind of doing both. We'd got a little bit of a traction on what would end up being clickbait. That was kind of happening. I'd be doing a few short films, writing short films, and then I tried my hand at this book, and I kind of thought whatever struck, I would follow. And they just both struck. And so, you know, at various times, I've been working. I'm 40. What am I now? 44. I've been working full time as a writer since 37, ish. And over that time, I've often thought, oh, I'll just go write books. Oh, I'm just going to write scripts, But I just keep. It just keeps. I just keep getting these opportunities, and so now I'm just sort of. It's this. There's no strategy to it. I just work in both and do stuff that I like, and it works out really well. And I think a lot of other authors are trying to get into screenwriting because, it allows you just to tell stories in a different way. It's financially, it's really good, and all of that sort of stuff. So I think it really works as a model. Working in both genres, in both worlds, is really it works really well as a writer because you can kind of it's it's a income, lifestyle, everything you can do. So if I was a budding writer, I probably would plan to do it now, knowing what I know now. But for me, it was just a very happy accident.
It does sound, though, that you were willing to take the plunge when you saw the opportunity
Mm.
as well. Because I think that is one thing around writing is there's an element of risk that when you're doing a 9 to 5 job, and if you've got a permanent role and it's ongoing, you've got your holidays and your sick leave and that there's an ongoing income and it's very safe to stay in that world.
Yeah,
So that when you're ready to follow your dream and passion, you have to be willing to jump at the opportunity when it comes as well. So is that
yeah.
how you felt at the time?
Well, yeah, and it's not easy. I mean, I think for me, I have a creative wife as well. So we were married at the time, but we were starving artists together. We were living in these little places, and we would budget for just enough to survive, really. And then we'd both be working bits and pieces. But because we both had that really creative drive, it was actually really easy to kind of prioritize that then. I think it surprised us both that it was me who kind of struck first because I was really bad at showing my stuff to anyone. So for me, it was sort of that was I had the support of my partner, but also I guess it's ego as well. I guess it's this kind of I had enough ego to think I could do it, and I really, really wanted to do it. And I think I didn't have any real negative voices in my life telling me I shouldn't. My parents, my family, they never said anything to my face. After I was published, my brother Jamie called me up and said, "Oh, we've been bitching about you for years and years, saying when's he going to get a real job?" And it was an apology, which felt amazing, by the way. So yeah, I think I was really lucky in that sense. It would be more challenging now. So now I have a daughter, and that would be more. It's so easy to say, you just got to back yourself. You just got to do it, take the plunge. But now that I'm in a situation where I'm supporting someone and I'm looking after someone, it would be so much more challenging now. And I think it's all about knowing when to take that plunge, I guess, which is really probably different for everyone. Yeah, and there is something though about momentum. So I think if you do take that plunge, if you've got an opportunity and you take it and then run with it, especially in those early years, I think I think there's something to be said about, okay, I've got a publishing deal. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to write the next book. Even if the advance on the first book wasn't much, there's something about that momentum that I think if you can do it, you do it. But yeah, man, it's not easy.
Well, I always dream of having the freedom to write a novel,
Yeah.
but I also know myself quite well and am quite concerned that I would just procrastinate because
Yeah.
I think that one key is that you have to have the drive and you've got to do the work.
Mm,
So it's amazing if you do suddenly have an opportunity to create, but then you
mm.
do actually also have to create.
Yeah, it's a really funny thing because, this is a fantastic problem to have, but when my first book came out, it was, a big success. It was all really great. It was fantastic. I was super excited. My whole life had changed, but then all of a sudden I had to write another one. And I had what I never had before, which was an audience and a deadline, which all of a sudden I was like, oh my, maybe this was a fluke. Can I do this again? And you do really need that kind of, the ability, I think, to shut out that little voice saying, you're not going to do this as much as you can. And I don't think, I certainly can't block it out all the time, but at least when I'm on the page, I can set it aside. And yeah, it's a funny thing because, some people want to be writers but then you remember when you're writing, you actually have to write.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing, So I think if you love it and you have that drive, it's the best. But you'd also find too that I had to really find my way. So when I first started doing it full time, I told myself I've got to be at my desk 9 to 5, and I've got to be treated like a real serious job. And then I found out, so I would blink and I would be watching Bigfoot videos on YouTube, because I just would procrastinate without even thinking. And then you kind of find your groove. And, for me, I've got a couple of hours of actual work at the computer and then I've got to step away. And so you get to know what you need to keep that drive going. And there's little tricks as well. And maybe some of the writers in your audience, maybe this will be helpful, but sadly he's passed away now, but my late father-in-law, my wife's dad, he was Everett DeRoche, and he was a screenwriter, and he wrote all these amazing Australian horror films, Razorback and Patrick and Long Weekend and all this really cool
Wow.
stuff. And he once said that, and he would just go out to his office and write. That's what he did. And he once said that one of the things he did was he would stop at the end of each workday, he would stop right before a scene he was really excited to write. So the next morning, he can't wait to get back to the computer and
Yeah.
start writing. And that's what I've adopted now too. So you do these little tricks to keep yourself motivated. It is freaking hard though, because procrastination is so easy. However, if you sometimes when I procrastinate, sometimes I can call it research. If it kind of makes its way into that soup, then you can call it research. But yeah, it's tough, and there's so much content and all that sort of junk.
Too much content these days.
Yeah, far
It's
too
quite
much.
overwhelming. So I have a few little questions to ask you just for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Do you have a tip to share with aspiring creatives who would like to emulate your career trajectory?
I think this will sound really, maybe it'll sound too simple, but I think one of the biggest things and the hardest things to do is click send on that email.
Mm.
You know, in On Writing by Stephen King, this beautiful memoir, or half memoir, half how to write a book. He says you should write with the door closed, rewrite with the door open, meaning that when you write your first draft, I mean, literally shut the door, but more it's sort of you can write without fear of judgment. But when you're rewriting, opening that door and letting someone else in is really, really important. And it might be your partner, but you need to be careful because you don't need someone who's going to just tell you what you want
Yes.
to hear. So it's a really tricky, but you don't want too much of an asshole either. So you've got to find the perfect amount of like a 40% asshole. But it's also clicking send on the, you know, when you're sending off to publishers and agents and competition. So that's a really big thing. You know, just this simple thing, this simple act of clicking send. More practically, though, I would really, really recommend people to enter writing competitions. So I had a very sort of misguided, cynical idea of what a writing competition was. I really had this very, very clear vision that they would get my manuscript, and there's thousands and thousands, and they read a page and then they screw it up and they throw it in the bin, you know. But really, there's not as many entries as you think, but also if you're shortlisted or lucky enough to win, you can just it just allows you to open doors that
Yeah.
otherwise would have been more difficult to open. You know, with the Nowhere Child, I I didn't know who to. I had this manuscript to finish. I didn't know who to send it to, and I entered this competition because Jane Harper had won it in the past, but also as an act of opening that door and getting myself out there and yeah, I won that year and that completely all of a sudden all these publishers that I wanted to get my work in front of were emailing me, and there was a
Yeah.
bidding war, and there was this sort of fever,
Oh,
and all of a
lovely.
sudden it was this huge thing, and that all came from a competition, and also clickbait. Years and years and years ago, I entered a competition. God, it would have been 2013, 2014, and it was a write a pilot, make up a show and write the pilot for the Australian Writers Guild, and I won that. And one of the the prizes was you got to go and have a meeting with Matchbox Pictures, and at the time, that's where Tony Ayres was, and that's how I met Tony. And then years later, we ended up, we had a Netflix show, and really that started. I wouldn't have known him if not for that competition. So I really, really think competitions are the way to go. And just to bang on about competitions a little bit more, they usually come with a deadline. So
Yeah.
that you've got to have it in by November 2nd. You've got to have it in. You know, you can't proof your manuscript anymore. You've got to send the thing off. So yeah, I would really recommend all of that. Somewhere in there, hopefully there's some good advice.
Definitely. Well, also, when you enter those competitions, you don't have to win for there to be impact as well,
Mm.
because there's often times where someone will read your work from that competition and it can lead to a publishing contract or those
Constantly.
connections. Yeah.
Yeah, you hear about this stuff all the time, and just shortlist honorable mentions, but also you will. I know an author. Just recently, I was talking about an author who had been judging a competition, and someone didn't win, but they loved this piece so much that they emailed the person. They struck up a relationship, and now they're sort of trying to he's trying to mentor her, and so it's really. Yeah, really, really good just to get your stuff. It's hard getting your stuff out there, but it's a good place to start.
And can you tell me one surprising thing about yourself that readers and other writers may not know about you?
I can. This is this weirdest thing. This is gonna change everyone's opinion. If you like me now, you won't in 30 seconds.
Look
When
out.
I was about 14 or 15, I read somewhere that one of the ways to become a werewolf is to drink water, rainwater from the paw print of a wolf, right? And I kind of got this idea in my head, and I was walking my dog one day, and I noticed it was raining, and I noticed some water had gathered in his paw print, and I just drank some water because I thought maybe I'd become a werewolf, and nothing happened. So
Because my next question is, are you in fact a werewolf now?
yeah, no,
Ah.
definitely not. Although I would say that, right? If I was.
So armed with silver bullets if
Mm.
you're hanging out with Christian White, just in case. Didn't get sick or anything?
No,
You're
believe it or not.
okay?
No, no, and that it really is just one in a item in a long list of peculiar things I did as a kid and still continue to do. But no, I didn't get sick. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's they say to eat dirt and you
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get healthy.
But is the reason you're not a werewolf because your dog was not a wolf?
Well, yeah, it wasn't really. It's supposed to be a wolf. It was my teen, in my high when I was in high school. It was my dog Tully. His name was, and he was just a mixture of all sorts. So maybe someone out there, if you've happened to be in the northern hemisphere, there's a wolf, some rainwater pooling in the footprint. Just kneel down and kneel down and take a sip.
Has that event made it into any of your work?
No, not yet actually, but it definitely will. I would love to write a werewolf story one day. Actually, years and years ago, I started a script. I never finished it, but I do love the classic monsters, and werewolf is yeah, maybe one day.
Amazing. And now I'm going to turn the questions over to you for you to ask me a question.
I know I love this, and before we started recording, you basically said how much you hate this part. It's so good though, because when I listen to podcasts, all my favorite podcasts, any little nugget of information about the podcaster's life is really interesting. So I think this bit's good. If you could have written any book ever in existence, what would it have been, and why? Is it because it's a great book, or is it because it's Da Vinci Code and made millions of dollars? What would that be?
Well, I do really love Playing Beatty Bow by Ruth Park. I
Oh, yeah.
would like to write something in that vein myself at
I'm
some
ashamed to
point.
say I've not read it. I'm gonna write it
Uh,
down.
it does feature in a lot of high school curriculums, but it's pretty much a time slip scenario where the main character goes back in time to um, early Sydney, Australia, and she has to find her way out. And there's a little bit of they've got the gift, and they can see with second sight and things like
Oh, that
that.
sounds cool.
Yeah, so
Okay,
I
yeah.
would like to write something like that. I probably will try to write something like that in the future.
There is
But
something interesting about, because I love time travel. I wonder if there's something in, a time traveler traveling back in time to plagiarize someone's work. To steal, to go back and write that book yourself, and how you'd feel, and all of that sort of stuff. There's something there. So kind of sci-fi historical fiction-y sort of thing.
yeah, yeah, and just a little bit of. I also want to have a bit of girl power in it as well.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll see how
Well,
that
I look
goes. But
forward
I
to
have
reading it.
been talking about writing that for about 10 years. So
You could do this is something I did with a friend when I started writing The Nowhere Child, where we had to be accountable to each other at the end of the week. So every Friday, we were supposed to, when we were both ready, share a chapter. It never ever happened. He never wrote anything. But for me, and I never shared anything because he hadn't written it yet.
yeah.
But for me, it was so good because I had this sort of driving thing that I have to do it. I have to get it ready for Friday. I have to get it ready for Friday. So maybe there's something you could do with your listeners, and that hold you accountable.
Yeah, I think I really do need to, yeah, face the music because I even have in my alarm on my phone writing time
Oh, that's
set,
good.
except I hit snooze. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
no, I'm too busy for that at the moment. I haven't got time. So I have attempted some ways to overcome that issue,
Yeah.
but I don't know how I have a podcast or a published book at all.
You're doing something right.
Something is happening. So yeah, it is interesting how much you can squeeze into the cracks when you want to do something.
Yeah.
Um,
One day.
but if we ever cross paths, Christian, it would be wonderful if I can say I've written it.
We absolutely
It's
will cross
done.
paths again, and I look forward to that. Yeah, I look forward to. I'll blurb it. Make me an early reader.
Amazing. And now your book is about to come out on the 28th of October. What are you
Yes,
doing are you launching it? Are you touring around?
I'm
What's
doing.
happening?
I'm doing a launch right at the end. It could not be closer to my house. Right at the end of my street, there's a little pub, and I'm doing a launch there. And then I'm doing a bit of a tour through November. Mostly, sort of basically just came off a tour last year for the Ledge, so which I went all around the country. This year, it'll be a little bit more low key. I'll be doing Victorian stuff, New South Wales stuff, and that's about it so far. But I would like to say look at my social media for details. I don't have social media, but you could look up my publishers are Firm Press and Simon Schuster, so that will have stuff on there if you want to come and God knows why, but if you want to come along to one of those events. But yeah, now the publicity, now the touring stuff begins. Which actually, as I know your audience is full of writers, so you'll all know this is the hard part. Right.
Yes, no one tells you
What
about
makes
that.
what draws one to write a book does not necessarily make them good at, going and talking to people, but it's really, really fun. It's a really cool, it's a fun part of the job. And yeah, I'll sort of tools down for a bit and just go and just fly around and meet people. It's good.
Yeah, just enjoy
Mm.
and socialize, have a few beers at the pub.
I will. Now that you've told me to do that, absolutely, I'll justify it.
Permission.
Thank you. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Christian. It's been wonderful to chat and get a bit of an insight into your writing career, and you're welcome anytime.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'll have to hurry up and write another book so I can come back.
No pressure. Totally Lit is an independent podcast. You can help support us to continue to chat with wonderful Australian creatives by leaving a review on iTunes or sharing our socials with your friends. You can also make a contribution at www.buymeacoffee.com/totallylit. This will also help with equipment and podcasting platform fees. I love to interact with our listeners, so feel free to say hello either by email or social media at totallylitpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn and Twitter, and now Blue Sky. I've also created a group on Facebook called the Totally Lit Writing Community. It's a space to continue the conversation and share your writing successes, events, launches and latest projects. Jump into the group and say hello. Thank you for listening to Totally Lit, and don't forget to go out into the world to read, write, create, ignite.